Hello, my name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. And in this week's video, I'm going to go back to the realm of music education. And one of my goals for the channel is to talk about both music ed as well as IT, and I've devoted a good bit of time to IT the last month or so with the Hyper-V series. So I'll do a couple of videos on the education side as well. I will try, if I can, I'll try to alternate. This week I'll do music education based stuff, another week I'll do IT based stuff. But if there's a project that comes down, such as that the Hyper-V project that I wanted to do, then I'll have multiple videos on that. So really just trying to make what makes sense for the flow of content. And for this video and the next couple I'm going to do on music education, this is all based on my experience and my experiences as an educator. I don't have official research that I'm backing what I say with. Is simply my experience. But the experiences I've had and other educators I've talked to and worked with, it seems like the things that I'm going to be talking about and opinions that I'm going to express are shared by a number of people and have seemed to be successful for them. That being said, everything I say in this video, if you take it to your classroom or whatever your teaching position is, it might not work, and if it doesn't, I'm sorry. If it does, great. But that's kind of the beauty of education that I'll get into. The target audience for this is really as I have in the title of the video, the young educator. And I don't necessarily mean young as in age, but young as in years in the profession. And these videos are going to be really some things that I wish that I had either known, been taught, or were made aware of during my early years of teaching. I don't say that in a way that implies I got poor teacher education or poor music education, that kind of thing. No, I was in retrospect, I was actually blessed with some fine teachers to unconsciously learn from as being a student myself in middle school and high school, and then I was blessed with some pretty wise educators as I did my undergraduate degree, and then further blessed with some pretty wise colleagues when I got into teaching. But the thing is, and this, if you as a young teacher get nothing else out of this video, make sure you get this, and that is that experience pretty much trumps everything in education as far as training. Now, does that mean training is useless? By no means. Training can help you make the most out of the experiences that you get. But you have to understand as a young teacher that everyone has year one or session one or whatever the environment that year is. You have to start at the beginning, and it's not possible for you to operate as a person with 2, 5, 10, 15 years of experience during your first experience as an educator. It's simply not going to happen. You're going to have some triumphs, you're going to have some failures, and it's easy to say and difficult to follow, but try to not, when you have a failure as an educator, try not to completely beat yourself up over it, but rather, take your lumps and then look at what was going on objectively. What went wrong? Can it be done better? If it can't be done better, is there a different way of doing the thing that would function better? But the key is trying to take what you get out of your experiences to make you a better educator. I remember in my younger years of teaching, I spent 8 years teaching public school before going into IT. Was the wise words that were told me was year one of teaching, and this is in the context of teaching in a public school, but again, I think this would apply to any situation of teaching, whether public school, private school, like corporate training, one-on-one private lessons, you name it. But year one of teaching is the goal is keep your head above water. You're going to have some triumphs. You're going to have some failures. You're going to have a lot of responsibilities put on you, some of which you have got some training from, either from your collegiate teacher education experiences or from just some of your own observations as a would-be educator. There will be some things that you had no idea about. There will be things that are district and school specific that you just have to learn, and you have to do the best you can with how quickly you're able to learn. But as long as everything that you do, or everything that you attempt, I should say, is done from the perspective of what's best for the kids, then even if it seems like you've had a failure, you haven't. Rather, you've had an opportunity to learn to get better, and this I think is true for any profession, but education especially. Your failures as an educator are your opportunities to grow. Now, you can grow with successes as well. I'm not saying you have to have a terrible teaching day every day to become an educator, or become a good educator. You can have some great successes on the day and say, hey, how can I replicate this, or how can I make this experience even better? But the key is trying to learn from experiences. So, as I said, if you get nothing else out of the video, get the fact that you get better with good experience. And good experience is not always positive experience. It can be negative experience, but you get it from experience, and experience takes time. There is no starting year one with 15 years of experience. It's simply not going to happen. But the actual topic at hand, if I had a young educator say, Eddie, can you give me some advice on how to survive this first year? One of the things I would try to hit home with them is about classroom management. And this sounds cliche, and also the thing to understand is you can get all of this advice prior to coming to teaching, either from videos like this, or from other educator colleagues, or from your teacher education. But remember, you have to experience it. You have to experience being in that teaching situation to really learn how to apply this. But that's a kind of above all else, classroom management is a key thing for any educator, but especially the young educator. You can have training in classroom management and such, but I truly believe it's one of these things that until you're in front of your students, you're not quite sure what to expect. Now, more experienced educators have more tools for classroom management, and that's why it seems like they can stand in front of a classroom and just make stuff work. And the young educators are like, how do you do that? Well, it takes getting some tools. And one tool that I want to talk about today within classroom management, you can probably spend a career studying just classroom management techniques and such. But the thing I want to talk about the most today is planning. And again, just like class, you need to be good with classroom management. Just like that sounds cliche, planning probably sounds cliche as well. But there's two aspects of planning in particular that I want you to draw attention to. And one of that is planning expectations. Now, what I mean by that is, with your classroom, how do you want it to function? What are the expectations that you have for your students? Do you expect them to follow a certain set of procedures at the start of your class? Do you want them to follow a certain set of procedures at the end of your class? What do you want them to be doing in the middle of your class? And part of that you're actually able to plan. You always have your expectations. Part of it, as you gain experience, you will realize will probably alter for whatever group of students you have. Some students respond better to certain expectations than others. But the key is you have to have some kind of expectation. Without that planned expectation, even if it's something that ultimately fails and that expectation cannot be achieved for whatever reason, you still have to have that starting point to be able to say, all right, this didn't work, what can I change? Versus just kind of coming in, not really having any kind of like concrete, defined ideas of what expectations to have. And the reason why you want to plan this is because expectations have to be taught. Now, probably in your teacher education program, in particular, if you're a music educator, a lot of your training has been with, instrument techniques or vocal techniques or whatever discipline within music that you're teaching. Teaching expectations might not have been a part of your curriculum, but it's something that has to happen. You can't assume that a kid walking into your classroom knows what to do, and knowing what to do relative to what you expect to have happen. And it has to be taught. And teaching is repeating. You'll hear that phrase all throughout your career. And you have to teach these expectations. I remember with my beginning band students, actually I took a technique from fellow educator of mine. We called it the lockdown, which I'm not sure if you can use that phrase in today's classroom, but 6 to 14 years ago you could. And basically what it was the kids came in and I taught them how to sit in lockdown, which is they were sitting with good posture, not like real uptight, but sitting tall, which is a key thing you have to be able to do to play an instrument. Being a band director, you have to sit with good posture. And they have their hands on their legs, and they find a point on the wall in front of them, and they focus on that. And I'd give them a little countdown to get to that lockdown position, and they would. And then once count down the lockdown, I'd say you have to hold this for 30 seconds. And really it was a team building exercise at the same time, because if there was one mistake with the lockdown, such as a kid was giggling or moving and such, I would make exceptions for like sneezes, because you don't have much control over sneezing. But if you make a mistake, we start the lockdown again. And initially kids would fail at it, and their friends and such would get annoyed with them. But after a couple of rounds of this, these students were able to make this happen for 30 seconds. And the team building thing with this is not explicitly saying this the first couple of times. I do eventually, that you are depending on all of the other people in your classroom to do this right, and they are all depending on you to do this right, to move on. And from the classroom management, the planning of expectations, what that was I was in a classroom of 60 kids. One person to 60 kids. You have to have a way of corralling that attention. And by practicing doing this lockdown several times, now I'd eventually tell them, hey, all right, we're done with the lockdown. Talk amongst yourselves, be loud and such. And then I would call a lockdown, and they'd go back to that position. So the expectation training there, and I would almost always do the call from lockdown from my podium, which raised my height by about 4 or 5 inches or so. And so the expectation training there, the planning, was that if I or any other adult comes in, steps on the podium, you need to be starting that process of getting to lockdown and paying attention, and because you're about to receive some kind of instruction that you need. That is an example, in my opinion, of planning your expectation. Before those kids even walked in the door, you knew what you wanted them to do was eventually get to where when you stand on the podium, they focus on you. Whatever it is going on comes to an end, the focus comes on you. And that doesn't happen day one, first time doing lockdown. This is a couple of class periods, and I wouldn't spend the entire class period on it. We'd do some other things, but every day, and usually I would for my 6th grade kids, my beginning kids, we would start every day with at least a 30-second lockdown, usually probably through the first 4 to 5 weeks, possibly 9 weeks. But part of that was just building the expectation. It wasn't Mr. Jennings beating them down with the lockdown. No, it's just, hey, it's Mr. Jennings' class. This is what we do in this. But if you didn't think that through before the kids got there, how would you take control of of the class. I'm not sure. I mean, the lockdown is not the only method to do it. There are fine band directors I know that haven't used anything like this. Whatever they do is successful for them. But I guarantee you, every one of them that that have well-managed classrooms thought through, okay, so moment one, kid enters my classroom, what do I want them to do? And for me, it was go to your seat. I'm knocking stuff down on my desk. It was go to your seat and prepare for lockdown. The other aspect of planning that I want to highlight today, so and this is related to expectations, but it is specific about traffic flow. Now, if you have a small class, this is probably not going to be as big of a deal. It is a deal that has to be dealt with. But if you're in a band situation and you have 60 plus kids funneling into your room, you have to know how you expect them to move. And the last teaching gig that I had, the basic workflow or the traffic flow was imagine a box. And they entered in, if you're facing the box, they entered in the upper right corner of the box. The traffic flow was come into that upper right corner. You had two blocks of chairs. Each block, I think, had 7 or 8 rows, and each row had 7 or 8 chairs. So from that point, you would split off. I'm still knocking stuff off my desk. You would split off. You probably can't see what I'm knocking off. It's a cup, luckily empty, so I'm not spilling stuff. But in this block, they'd split off. If you sat in the on this block of seats in the far right corner, you go behind the seats and then up to your row. If you sat in the seats that are on this corner, you simply come into the room and move down the row into your seats. When we exit, I would actually, especially for a large class, I would start my exit procedure before the actual bell rings for the end of the class. I will start lining them up, and to exit, we would usually go in reverse order. That far side of the room, they would come up through the row to the door. The other side of the room, I would make them they would have to go to the end of this row and come out, versus trying to come into the middle and come out, because that's going to cause a traffic jam for the folks that are coming from that far side of the room. And little things like that you have to think through, because from the perspective of a kid, it's get to where I need to be. Whatever the shortest path is. Maybe the shortest path isn't the easiest path, but man, it's shorter to try to walk over 3 rows of chairs than walk around this block into my row and into my seat. They're going to try to do that. So again, goes back to planning. How do you want the kids to move in the classroom? All right, so you figure that out. Now you have to plan, all right, how do you teach this? And what I did with my starting kids was, for the first couple of days, they did not start actually in the classroom. I was blessed with a pretty long hallway that came to my classroom that didn't have a whole lot of other classes on the hallway, because the band room was a relatively big classroom. And so I would start with my kids in 2 lines against the wall closest to my door outside. And then I would bring them into the classroom, telling them how I wanted them to walk. And if they messed up, we went back out and tried it again. But eventually they learned the expectation of what to do. And so from that point, they're already in their seats. Then I teach them how to do the lockdown. But the point being, you have to think it through and plan ahead. And you may realize that your plan for traffic flow does not work. And even though you would like your kids to move this certain way, maybe that's not like an intuitive way for them to get to the point that you want. And you have to make a choice at that point. Either you are going to try to retrain them to do the right thing, or, and this is where experience might come in, you might realize, hey, I could really try to train this and make it work. Or I can see, all right, how are the kids kind of naturally wanting to move? Is there a way that I can alter my expected traffic flow to still work for me as an educator, to not have kids running over each other trying to get to where they're supposed to be, but also be more intuitive for the students to follow? So those are examples of both planning expectations and taking some early experience from how those expectations worked, but either just a discipline expectation such as the lockdown or your traffic flow, and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and then you as the educator, just because you teach something one way doesn't mean it can't change. Now, you want to try to be as consistent as you can be there, and that's really one of the big challenges, is asking yourself, when is something not working, and I need to make a change. And I think for young educators, you give up on an idea sometimes a little too quick. For example, that traffic flow idea, right? Kids aren't making it to where you want them to be in the way that you want them to happen. Well, the next day, unless it was just some kind of catastrophe and kids were trampling each other, which is probably not going to be the case, but the next day I wouldn't necessarily change what you do. I would try the same thing again, because remember, the kids have to be taught. Kids don't automatically know how you want them to move into your classroom. They have to be taught that. Now, after several days of this, if things still aren't working, then reassess. That's not being inconsistent. That's being smart. But if day one, again, assuming non-catastrophic failure, day one, if it didn't go exactly as planned, and then day two you completely change the traffic flow expectation, you're really kind of back to day one again, because this new change, especially if it's radically different than what you did, is going to take some time for the kids to learn. Now, it is very easy for me to ramble on and on and on about education stuff, so I'm going to stop here with this particular video, and then I'll do some more over other topics. But just to give you a quick recap as far as this particular advice to young educator, something that you want to think through is within the realm of classroom management. And the two things that I want you to take away from this, one is the need to plan, and the need to think through how you want things to happen prior to your kids coming through the door the first time to your classroom. And within that, two things that you want to make sure that you do try to plan through, think through. Whether or not you continue to use it or not is a different story. Is basic expectations for them, such as how do you want them to give you attention. For me, it was the stand on the podium, we go to lockdown, then we move on. And thing number two is how they're going to enter the classroom, exit the classroom, move between wherever it is they need to move between. And for me, it was planning. They come in the upper right corner and they have to file in to where they need to go. So I hope you found this helpful for you. If you yourself are a young educator, and in the United States, most of you are starting to move toward the end of your first semester. So if this is your first semester as a young teacher, hopefully this will help kind of give you some food for thought as you reflect on what's went on from August or September till now, to see how you can improve stuff in the present and then improve stuff in spring semester. If you know of an educator that might benefit from this, feel free to share it. And also, young educators and experienced educators alike, feel free to comment on the video. If there's one thing I learned in my 8 years as a public school teacher, and then in my many other years as an educator, both private lessons and then teaching IT folks some stuff, we learn best from other educator feedback. There is no one educator that knows it all, and when we share ideas on classroom management or insert thing here, we tend to find what works best for ourselves, as well as what might work well for a colleague that and such. So if you enjoyed the content, make sure you click like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell on the subscribe page so you can be made aware of when new content comes out. And as always, best of luck to my fellow educators, in particular young educators. I promise you will make it. You will survive, even if it seems tough. Thanks for your time and with watching, and I'll see you the next time.